Alright, so Dressed Impress has finally addressed the allegations of theft regarding what they're going to be doing next, and some of the messages were kind of hidden and hard to find, which I think was a bit strategic, but I found them thanks to some of you guys, and we're going to go over them in this video, as well as an update on the status of the plus-size bodies and other issues in the game. So with that in mind, for those that don't know, Dressed Impress has been called out by several smaller artists as well as other games such as Infinity Nikki for allegedly heavily referencing and taking without credit certain assets or heavy inspiration from items in other games, and unfortunately it's really harmful. And I think some people don't understand why, but it's because Dressed Impress is making a lot of money, and unfortunately, it's just not okay to be making money off a concept that isn't fully yours. Even if you 3D modeled it from scratch or whatever, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there are innocent artists, such as a small shoe designer based in France, I believe, who had their shoe design basically taken from them and put in Dressed Impress with no credit, and the game, to my understanding, profited off of it. So with that in mind, there's a lot to go over, and we're going to get straight into it. So, this is the part that I feel like a lot of people don't know, but basically, this person by the name of Ender, which I believe this is the same Ender that was the previous whistleblower in the B Plays mistreatment or alleged mistreatment in the Dressed Impress Discord server. Now, if you don't know what that was about, basically, when B Plays got demoted from community manager, there's some people who came out about, mistreatment and kind of just the poor management of Dressed Impress in their opinion, and Ender was one of those people who was like a whistleblower in that situation. Now, I believe this is the same person, and basically, they were talking about some issues that are currently in the Dressed Impress community, and they were replying to a message from the new community manager. Now, this new community manager was hired recently, and so far, I'm gonna be honest, they seem to be very professional, very nice. I don't have anything negative to say about them at all, and it seems like they have some experience doing community management for like a university, from what I can tell. So I have nothing to say in regards to the community manager themselves. This is not about them. But basically, Ender made this post talking about, how the community manager says, we're working behind the scenes to deal with bad actors, which can't be addressed as publicly. Which I guess Ender was saying here, like, you need to be transparent about what's going on, the issues in the game, because there's been a lot of issues in Dressed Impress that haven't been addressed, and it's really harmful to the community because it makes people not trust you. And they had some really good points here, which I'll put on the screen for you guys to read if you'd like to. But the final point here was number 4, Dressed Impress asset theft with no accountability. There have been repeated instances of Dressed Impress taking assets from smaller creators. To my knowledge, there has been no meaningful acknowledgement, explanation, or corrective action. This is a major concern. Ignoring it only damages the integrity of the team, which is incredibly well worded. Props to Ender, because I agree, Dressed Impress would just not say anything about stuff being allegedly stolen and would just, quote, rework it, which is something I've discussed in my videos that I think is harmful, because you have to acknowledge when you made a mistake, and if it's a repeated action of consistently, allegedly stealing assets or heavily referencing assets without permission or without proper credit, that is harmful. And then to just, quote, rework the item when you get called out so you can just ignore it, that's not right, and that's not professional, especially from a large company like Dressed Impress. Now, the community manager responded, and this is something I feel like a lot of people didn't see because it was kind of buried in the chats, but the community manager responded same day on the 23rd of November saying, this is a really valid concern, and I totally agree that it's not okay. The affected artists we know of have been and are being reached out to. The devs have made sure to apologize and offer retributions, which retribution basically means like something to make things right. I'm curious if those retributions were financial. I would hope so, especially for that one footwear concept, artist from France. They definitely deserve to be compensated when their shoes were directly, in my opinion, copied into the game. I hope there's some sort of financial compensation, but I don't know. They go on to say, moving forward, we're working to make sure that we'll be utilizing our concept designers' official designs. We really appreciate the callouts and want to make sure any current or future affected artists that are affected get the proper recognition and apologies, which I agree, recognition and apologies. What about financial compensation? Because some items, such as items for the Baddie Pass, required players to purchase tiers or had the ability for players to purchase levels to it and stuff like that, or, currency to buy certain assets that were allegedly copied. And especially the game profited off of that. Even if you took the item out, there are still players that bought bundles or certain clothing assets with the assumption that that was the asset they were getting, and the asset at its core was taken from somebody without permission. So I really do hope that part of this, apologies, which I'm sure this person wouldn't necessarily know, but I do hope that part of Dressed Impress's apology to these creators that they allegedly stole from is to financially compensate them, because I feel like, hey, sorry, only goes so far, especially when you're a big game and you actively profited, from my opinion and my perspective, off of the work of other people. They go on to say, in terms of addressing the removals, I'll work with the team to see if when we can communicate these issues appropriately in public. And honestly, all things are community related. If there are concerns, while I don't know everything, I'll do my best to see what can be addressed. So always feel free to ask. So Again, a very professional, nicely worded response, much different than the previous community manager, B-Plays, where she called everybody miserable because they didn't agree with her. But this is obviously very well worded, so props to them. Now, shortly after, there was some announcements that came out. However, these announcements didn't seem to be in the actual full announcement channel, which I feel like was kind of strategic. Because I didn't get a notification about these. I don't know, maybe there's a glitch, I don't know. But I think it's interesting when they say they're going to address things publicly and then it's not in like the main announcement channel, they're put in a separate announcement channel, knowing full well, in my opinion, that certain people wouldn't be checking that other channel. So I do think that's a little bit disingenuous in my opinion, but that is just my opinion. Now, in this announcement, they addressed several things, including on the previous removal of items. So this is just like a snippet of that message. I didn't include the whole message, so keep that in mind. You guys can view it. It's a section, actually, let me check it for you. It's called Community News. So it's a channel there called Community News instead of the official announcements channel, and it's under suggested, at least from what I can see. Now, the message reads, I've seen lots of concerns regarding items like monster heals being reworked for the winter update, in brackets, which, good, that have been removed without prior explanation. Monster heels were the one clothing item that I was heavily referencing in this video that were made by a concept artist in France. Again, I believe it was France, I can't quite remember. As stated in the previous message here, and they linked the chatting message, when there are reports involving other artists, we reach out to the affected artists to discuss and ensure that the proper apologies and or compensations are being offered. Okay. To provide more context, our modelers previously took heavy inspiration directly from Pinterest. Moving forward, we'll make sure that there is no longer that this is no longer the case. Our concept artists will utilize inspiration from different places and cultures to create unique designs. It is our pledge to create unique and refreshing items. Awesome. Should any future issues arise, I'll do what I can to communicate item removals, / replacements, and ensure the proper action is taken. I understand a lot of players would like more clarity on this, but these conversations take place privately for confidentiality reasons. Which, no hate to the person who wrote this. I think the confidentiality reasons is a load of BS. I'm gonna call it out right here. I think that's code for we don't want to tell you guys exactly how much we're compensating people because this issue is public, right? It's not like this is something that happened behind the scenes. This was something where a massive game on Roblox publicly posted and, in my opinion, profited either directly or indirectly off of the work of other artists by heavily, taking inspiration without proper credit, heavily referencing, etc., right? And artists weren't properly credited for that work. And I think it's a little bit interesting to publicize that content and profit off of it. And then when it comes to making things right, you're going to keep it all hush hush about what you're doing to make things right. Because it's a lot to say, oh, we're going to say apologies, we're going to reach out, we're going to make things right, and we're going to compensate them. Personally, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, I think if you do something like this and the community has been impacted, so players purchased items or had access to certain items that are reworked without any notice, and they purchased something that they no longer have, and they have a different item and stuff like that, I think that these reparations and these corrections need to be public because you made it public by adding it to your game. And so, in my opinion, you have an obligation to be transparent with your audience, and saying for confidentiality reasons, I think is a load of BS in my opinion. I don't think that's a valid thing to say. I think it's really silly. The public and people who play your game deserve to know how you're making things right. Because personally, I don't want to support a game if that game is going to say, oh guys, yeah, we're going to compensate artists, and then I never hear anything about it. Because at the end of the day, example, if I made something or you spent a bunch of time making something and you put your heart and soul into it and it's your livelihood, and then some massive game takes it from you and they come around and say, oh, oopsie, sorry, and then never, do anything more than that, I'd be really angry. And to be honest, I really want to know what compensation was offered to these people. And you can say it's none of my business, but I feel like it is my business when this was a public item that was offered to players and that players had access to. And it was pretty public when the artist called Dressed to Impress out and was like, hey, why are you copying my stuff? Like, what's going on here? And so I hope that, if Dressed to Impress isn't going to be transparent, that the artist may be, and artists may say, they've made things right or they haven't made things right, whatever. Because I feel like when things are confidential or like hidden from the public, in my opinion, that allows, space for things to not be done properly or for, maybe compensation to be significantly lower than people would expect. And I think part of, holding people accountable and ensuring that people are properly compensated is making things public so that there is that public pressure to do the right thing. Because at the end of the day, if there wasn't public pressure, not necessarily from me, but from other creators on the internet, other YouTubers who are like, hey, Dressed to Impress, this is bad, this is not moral, this is unethical, this looks like stealing, like what's going on here? If there wasn't that public pressure, it is my firm belief and my firm opinion that nothing would have been done about this, that they would have just continued to quote rework items and not talk about it, not discuss it, not address it, which I think is just unethical in my opinion. I think it's not very fair. And I really do hope that they drop the whole quote confidentiality reasons and are just transparent. I don't understand like the whole problem with being transparent. Like, let's just be honest about stuff. It doesn't have to be all hush hush and secret. I understand certain things are contracted or certain things are, you know, for legal entities to discuss, and maybe that's what they're referencing here, that there's gonna be lawyers involved. I don't know. But regardless, when it's all said and done, does it really hurt to say, hey guys, we paid the artist for their work, or hey guys, we reached an agreement with the artist and this is what we're doing? Why does it have to be we can't learn anything else about it because it's confidential? That doesn't make any sense. It was public, you know what I mean? So that's just my 2 cents on that. And then they go ahead in this other message that was below that in the same channel, talk about plus size, custom eye shading, etc. Lastly, we've been seeing all the questions / suggestions for features y'all are excited for. It's great to see that there's so much love for them, but there's no updates for now. I promise you we'll share updates when we can. So again, this is no hate to the community manager. They are just the messenger. And I'm not gonna sit here and shoot the messenger, guys. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But what do you mean there's no updates? Well, what do you mean? Because to my understanding, Dress to Impress, and this wasn't this community manager, it was old community managers and the dev team that were saying, hey, yeah, so the plus size bodies are coming soon. Like, look at this plus size body model we made. It's coming out. Like, what do you guys think? We're going to adjust it. And then boom, radio silence. Which, that's what I don't like about this whole kind of situation, and a trend that I've seen quite a bit in Dress to Impress is I think it's a great game, but the issue with transparency is a really big issue in my opinion. You can be transparent about certain things, but as soon as it's not convenient, as soon as it maybe takes longer than expected, as soon as it's not the main focus and there isn't that external pressure, boom, it's gone. Which I think is really harmful. And people can say, oh, it's so much work to make plus size bodies. You're right. I'm not saying it isn't, but I think it's a little bit hypocritical to say it's a lot of work and that it's really hard and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, Dress to Impress can release a bunch of updates that they profit from, which is the same kind of thing with Royal High that I've discussed, where games want to profit, and I understand that, but you can release a baddie pass. You can release the Wicked collab. You can release the winter update and stuff like that. Like, how is it that you can do all those things that make you money, but when it comes to representation and making people feel heard and, you know, being an inclusive game, oh, no, guys, that doesn't make us money, so we're not focusing on that right now. Keep in mind that the whole plus size body thing is over a year old. This has been something that players have been asking for, and the concepts are over a year old, I believe, at this point, or roughly that amount. And it's honestly really silly, in my opinion, that it's been a year and you've released so many updates and you can't do the plus size bodies, which again, I know it's a lot easier said than done, but I just think, again, this is just a load of not being transparent. There's no updates. You're telling me that you made that concept and then nothing? You're just like, okay, next. I don't know, it just seems kind of silly to me, but regardless, I'm not trying to be super hateful or anything like that, but rather calling out hypocrisy when I see it and calling out what I think is unfairness and just being, in my opinion, a little bit deceptive. This has nothing to do with the community manager. I think they're awesome. They seem really nice. They seem super professional, and their stuff is very well worded here, which awesome. They have experience, it seems like, in community management. That's amazing. And I'm not here to shoot the messenger. However, I do think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that you're going to be handling things and then say it has to be handled privately. Like, let's just be transparent about stuff. What's the problem with being honest? Let's just all be honest, because then there's no room for misunderstandings or for stuff to slip under the rug or for things to go unnoticed. And same with the plus size bodies. Is it that hard to be inclusive, guys? It's 2025. Come on. Not every single model on the planet is super skinny, and I think it's silly that people don't recognize that there's plus size models, or even just people who are mid-sized. I think that's ridiculous. But regardless, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think they addressed it properly? Do you think more could have been done? Let me know in the comment section, and I will see you guys next time.